With various federal trans bans and the Supreme Court putting trans rights in the hands of states, now is a critical time for trans Americans to seriously consider how safe or unsafe their state is. Last year, I moved from Arkansas to New Mexico, and I'm very happy with that decision. If you're a trans person who is planning a move, wondering if you should move, or just curious in general, hopefully this video can help give you an idea of which states are welcoming and safe for you, and which states you should probably avoid or even leave if you can. And by the way, I made a dedicated video about my move from a red state to a trans sanctuary state, so if you're considering a move, check that one out. As for this video, we are going over the top 3 best and top 3 worst states for trans people. But first, let's zoom out and take a look at the country as a whole. As you can see on the Movement Advancement Project's equality map, specifically the gender identity version that rates states based on their trans laws and policies, it's very clear, just in general, which states we should probably be avoiding. Anything in red is going to have anti-trans laws and policies, so none of those are good for us. And in light of recent rulings, I'd assume they'll keep getting worse. So even if your state isn't ranked among the worst in this video, but does show up red on this map, I would definitely take the time to look into the anti-trans policies and laws it has passed, as well as the bills that have been introduced, and consider how those might affect you. I'm not trying to raise alarm bells, just gently encouraging everyone to give it some thought. Erin Reed has a national risk assessment map that she updates regularly. I know with the massive influx of anti-trans legislation, it's been really hard for everyone to keep up with what's going on. And translegislation.com tracks anti-trans bills. You can click the map and see what's going on in your state. All of these are great resources for, keeping up with this stuff where you are. Most people I talk to don't know the full extent of their state's policies, and that's totally understandable. Keeping up with trans issues can be exhausting, but it doesn't have to be. Our sponsor, Ground News, has completely changed the way that I consume the news and made staying up with trans issues so much easier. Their website and app gathers coverage from around the world in one place and provides key insight on how each story is being covered. For example, a story like this: Supreme Court to review state bans on transgender athletes' participation in school sports. This story is being covered by 365 sources. That is a massive amount of news outlets talking about this, with coverage all across the political spectrum. It's definitely an important issue that I want to be keeping up with, and with Ground News, I don't have to get sucked into doom scrolling or subject myself to all of the different opinions about this story that I might see, because it's all laid out right here. If I just want a quick snapshot of what's going on, I can read through the summaries and see that these state trans bans that have been blocked in lower courts for being discriminatory are now being appealed by the states, sent to the Supreme Court to decide whether or not they violate Title IX. And if I want to dive deeper into this story, I can scroll down, and all 365 articles are right here, with helpful insight on each news source, like their political bias, factuality rating, and who owns them. So if I want to, I could sort by articles that are very high factuality and independently owned, and see this story from the Associated Press: Supreme Court will take up a new case about which school sports teams transgender students can join. I also find it really helpful to be able to see how these stories are conveyed by sources like Focus on the Family, a far-right, low factuality news outlet, with the headline "U.S. Supreme Court takes up cases on boys in girls sports." I found that makes it a lot easier for me to interact with and explain these topics to folks who are ignorant or misinformed on these situations. And that's just one of the reasons why I love Ground News, and I think you will too, so give them a try and get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan, the same one that I use, when you use my link in the description below, or go to groundnews.com/Turner. Check it out. For my ranking of the best and worst states, I'm considering more than just the legislation and policies of each state. While that's probably the main factor, it's not the only one. Others include access to resources, community, and diversity. So without further ado, let's get started with the number 3 worst state for trans people in 2025, Kansas. If you're a friend of Dorothy, it's time to click those heels and go back to Oz. Kansas is pumping out the anti-trans legislation right now. They have their finger on the printer. As I said, a lot of these red states are doing the same stuff, and it's all, pretty bad. What really sets Kansas apart is their drive. They are highly motivated right now. And beyond just the policies and legislation, the state is 87% farmland. So unless you're in the city, you're probably in a very small rural town, which I can tell you from experience is not the ideal place to live as a trans person. You're going to have a harder time finding community. You're likely to be the only trans person in your town, and if you're in your hometown, then everyone knows who you are, and it's like super fun doing that. And of course, there's going to be less access to resources, less doctors that are, educated on trans stuff, less equality centers, less safe and discreet community places that you can go. Just overall, very unlikely to find the ideal situation. I'm sure there are pockets of Kansas where trans people can thrive, but it is definitely not the majority. Now, the third best state for trans people, Colorado. No surprise here. Very liberal, lots of shield laws, these refugee protections. If you're coming from another state to get care, Colorado has laws protecting you and, allowing you to do that safely. They also just passed HB 1312, legal protections for transgender individuals, known as the Kelly Loving Act, which covers a lot of different aspects of existing as a trans person. And the state has only introduced 5 anti-trans bills this year, all of which have failed. Cities like Boulder have a huge queer community, tons of resources, and of course, it is just an absolutely beautiful state. So for all of these reasons, Colorado has earned its place as the number 3 best state for trans people in the US, according to me. Now, the number 2 worst state for trans people might surprise you, Tennessee. More like negative Tennessee, -4 Tennessee. Tennessee has a lot of laws directly targeting trans people. Similar to Kansas, they are highly motivated. It's like they are trying to catch up to that number 1 spot right now. Obviously, very Republican, very rural, and even in the biggest city, which is Nashville, where you would expect more community, more liberal spaces, it's still pretty red. It's also where the Daily Wire's headquarters is based. So there is a non-zero chance that you might run into Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh. And that alone is enough for me to never step foot in that city, possibly even the state. But I would step foot in the number 2 best state for trans people, which is Maine. I was surprised by this one. I don't know a lot about the state. Everything that I've heard about Maine is from a Spose song. But it is among the highest rated for trans protections, lots of positive laws, shield laws, refugee protections, good policies. Just as with Colorado, all of its anti-trans bills have failed this year. And perhaps best of all, it borders Canada. So if you need to make a quick escape, the option is there. That is literally the reason I gave it number 2 and not number 3. All right, here we go. Our number 1 worst state for trans people is actually a tie, if you'd believe it. Are you shocked? It is a tie between Texas and Florida, obviously, because they're doing some scary stuff down there on top of the crazy anti-trans bills they've been introducing and the many very aggressive anti-trans laws they've passed. They are, in addition to that, doing things to bypass the legislative process, essentially, just announcing restrictions for trans people, like not letting people change their driver's license or just deciding that they're not valid anymore because they've had their gender marker changed. And not doing that as a bill that's been introduced to be voted on and passed into law, but just a letter, just a general statement from someone in charge. And then the state agencies just decide to enforce that. It's not great. Before this spot would have just gone to Florida. As I said in a previous video, Ron DeSantis has been collecting anti-trans laws like Girl Scout badges, and that remains true. Florida has long been what seems to be the testing grounds for anti-trans laws. Pretty much every aspect of trans existence is policed. They have already banned 80% of adult trans healthcare, which is obviously something that nobody ever thought these states would be doing. However, Florida is a big state with several major cities, so there is community, there is safe space to be found, even if the state itself, on a systemic level, is very anti-trans. But Texas, they have been fighting hard for this title with how quickly they have gone from matching the other red states with their anti-trans laws to now, since the election, it feels like they have honed in on trans people and are actively continuing to up the stakes. They have prioritized this and are now walking in step with Florida, with the anti-trans shit. So if I were a trans Floridian or Texan, I would be honestly putting all of my effort towards leaving the state as soon as possible, which is not a privilege that everyone has. And if that weren't an option for me, I would definitely be trying my best to go to Austin or Fort Lauderdale, where there's at least a very strong community to help offset the difficulty of living in an aggressively anti-trans state. But if I could go anywhere, I would be going to the number 1 best state for trans people, which is also a 2-way tie between New York and California. No surprise here, 2 of the bluest states in the union with pretty much every protection and shield law there is. And of course, just the overall vibe and culture of these places. It's very trans-friendly, very trans-accepting, though just as the red states have their trans-friendly pockets, blue states also have their less trans-friendly pockets. But if you can afford to live in LA or New York City, there's obviously tons of diversity, endless community, on top of being in a very accepting and protective state. If there's any place where a trans person can thrive in this country, it's gonna be there. And since that one feels like I'm just stating the obvious, I'm gonna throw in an honorable mention of another wonderful state where trans people can thrive, and that is New Mexico. And it is far less expensive, has shield laws and protections for trans people, and I'm here. So, what if we all just moved here? Wouldn't that be cool? But no, I do really love it here. I'm very happy I got out when I did. I really feel for everyone who's stuck in the red states right now. If that's you and you are in a really bad situation and you can't get out yourself, you don't have the means to do that, there are resources that can help. I'm going to put some of those on the screen right now. The Transcontinental Pipeline, TC Queer Transplants, Project Open Arms from Traction, the Trans Relocation Fund and Aid Network. The Trans Resistance Network has lots of helpful resources, including relocation support. And finally, Trans World Express. And there are others, but hopefully this list gives you a good place to start, and if needed, they can point you in the right direction. There's a lot of scary shit happening to lots of groups of people. Lots of people are facing oppression under this administration, and it sometimes feels like the people who are speaking against this oppression and fighting for people aren't doing the same for us. But there are lots of groups who are dedicated to helping us and protecting us and keeping us safe and fighting for us. So don't get discouraged. We are all here dealing with this same shit, and we're gonna get through it. So that's it. That's my video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to join the Goose Troop today. Give this video a thumbs up, because one like equals one hunk. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.